Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Moonshot, or Moon's Hot. I'm going to go with Moon's Hot. It sounds like a cool title. So, here's the goofy thing about this title immediately. This title doesn't make sense because these people are not going to the moon, they're going to Mars. Mars Hot? Mars Shot? It should have been Mars Shot. That would have made a lot more sense. But whatever. Why is this called Moonshot? It makes no sense. But it is what it is with this movie. So, I guess since there was like Moonfall that came out recently, they're like, oh, okay, well, maybe we should just kind of, fly under the radar with our title. Anyways, so for this film, like, we have a futuristic movie that takes place in 2049, which is not the Blade Runner 2049 that has like way technical advanced like things. Really, we just kind of have a future that kind of feels similar, but with big massive robots that hire people to be baristas and stuff like that. We have that going on in this movie. So we have Sophie and we have Walt, who are similar, but like there's similarities between the two, but the way that they are also similar is like Walt is kind of more of this kind of goofball, free spirit kind of person, and we of course have Sophie, who is kind of a much more structure, a much more high intelligence kind of person, and so like kind of polar opposites between the two. But here's also the thing: we kind of have this like when Harry met Sally situation going on, where it seems like at the beginning of this movie, we have these two that seem to find girlfriend and boyfriend, but it seems that at some point in this movie that doesn't exactly turn out the way that we would like it to. So instead of having them going on and finding two different people, they go and find themselves. So isn't that great? It's a date movie that takes place in space. So here, like, this movie honestly is, there's a lot of goofball characters in this movie. There's a lot of goofs. Captain Tartar, what the is that? We have Zach Braff, who plays this billionaire called Leon Coffey, or Covey, in this movie, Covey. And so here is the kind of teeing up of this film. So we have Walt, who is to desperately try and go on and try to get accepted to this Covey Industries student Mars program. And he has tried this 36 going on 37 times. And every single time he has to get rejected, as well as him probably getting rejected from life, because really a lot of people are just so tired of Walt talking about this thing called space. So while that is happening, we have Walt, who is to bump into Sophie, and then once he is to start bumping into Sophie, he just can't stop bumping into her. So Walt and Sophie, it seems like they start talking to one another, and it seems that both of them are to go on and realize it's like, well, hey, like, I would kill to go to Mars. And Sophie's like, well, I can go to Mars because I have $1 million to make my way to Mars. And Walt is like, say what? And Sophie's like, yeah. And so all of a sudden, now that Walt has realized now Sophie can go to Mars, like, Walt just loses it. Like, he just can't take it anymore. That all these people are just going to space, and he can't. So he's going to go on and hook and crook his way to get into this thing called space, to get it to this place called Mars. So nobody better stop Walt, because he is going to go on and make it to this thing that is to be called space. Markiplier would be proud because Markiplier just loves space. Hence why he's going on and doing Markiplier in space, because that's what he's doing for his next current thing stuff project that has gone on to do this thing called a trailer. So, with that said, so this movie is just an okay, good film, goofy characters, weird stories, weird concepts. So one thing, like if I didn't say this before, both these characters have these like weird checklists of things. We of course have Walt who has this goofy checklist, and we have Sophie who is to have this checklist about her boyfriend and how like he fits the bill in every single category, and like all of a sudden Walt is going on and checking all this list and he's like, wow, like really all of this stuff, really. So she's one of those kind of gals, but really when going on to it, they both fall for one another eventually within an hour and 44 minutes. Man, do they really have to take that long stretch of time to find out that they're both perfect for one another. Yeah, we're really both perfect for one another, but like, how about we like don't go on and think about it right away? So let me take a moment here to just charge my thing here. Let me take a second. Okay, so let's just go on into spoilers. Like I feel like I've kind of teed up this movie, told people, farted a lot, and so let's go on. Let's double five this bad boy up. Let's go out of our way to say that we've seen this film because technically we have. Let's go out of our way to go into spoiler time. Spoiler time is about the time we get to spoil this movie. So how this is set up is, of course, we have Walt, who is doing this video, desperately hoping that he can go on to this thing called Mars. So Walt is going on and doing this video essay to be connected to the Kofi Industries Student Mars program. And so Walt is going on and explaining how Walt and his mother used both lived together, and his mother had like 100 different careers. So Walt tended to move around a lot, which basically means that this guy was eventually at some point just going to be invisible to everybody, because I would know, because normally when you would move around, Walt would probably just go on like, oh, so I actually need to make friends with people now? Because, yeah, a lot of times if you move around a lot, like it would just seem that really the last thing on your mind would probably just be like, oh, well, I should probably like continue to make friends. But anyways, so but eventually you find him in just like a lot of patches and in different places and whatever, and you eventually get to know people, and it's like cool that it's like, wow, like after X amount of years we still have this friendship somehow or another. It still works out. So we go on into this story, and so Walt is to go eventually to this party. After, of course, he is to be in 2049 and is working under a robot named Gary, who Gary, of course, is this kind of weird robot boss who, of course, is telling Walt, it's like, well, hey, like, I can fire you, Gary, if it makes you happier. And so, because, like, obviously Walt is just kind of burnt out working at this coffee barista job, and so, like, he wants something better from his life. But we just have it where, sadly, Walt is just this, like, average guy, and there's nothing he can do. So Walt, of course, is to make it to this party from a friend, but his friend is telling Walt, like, hey, go on and do anything at this party, but I swear to God, like, don't talk about space. Like, talk about anything else but space, please. Because this guy just goes on and on about space, about Mars, about whatever, because he just loves to want to just discover something. And it seems like everything is to be snuffed away from him as far as discovery is to go. So Walt makes it to this party, and he goes on and is to accidentally bump into Sophie while she is like Mars timing, because she's like FaceTiming her boyfriend in Mars. And so accidentally we have it where Walt is to kind of klutz his way into this room, and he accidentally crushes this girl's orb, and so Sophie is to have problems talking to her boyfriend after Walt is to go on and crush this orb. But Walt is so fascinated by this guy who she's talking to on Mars, and Walt is just like, well, hey, like, can I talk to Kelvin? And Sophie's like, no, like, I'm talking to him. This is our time. And so Walt is just trying to like backpedal upon this whole thing because he likes talking to like people about space and whatever, and like this guy's on Mars, so he's like, oh my god. So after Walt is to like kind of ruin uh, Sophie's expensive orb, which she herself can fix because she's tech savvy. So Walt goes on and is to further go into this party where all of a sudden a drunk girl just kind of flings herself on to Walt here as Walt is going on and mentioning, it's like, man, like, I just want to go on and just like discover something, like maybe just discover that forest, or like I just want to go on and like and I want to be the guy that at some point was going on a boat and like a number of hundreds of years ago, and like find everything. And so we have this girl's like, well, that's all good and great and all, but like everything's already discovered, everything's already, and then she just like walks off. So all of a sudden we have Ginny, who seems to immediately just like float over to Walt, and we of course have Walt immediately know who this girl is because he had had a class with her before, and Ginny is just like, well, like, wait a minute, like, so like I know who you are, and Walt is just like, well, yeah, so please just come over here and know who I am. And Ginny's like, oh yeah, Walt, yeah, because this guy is invisible, sadly, so to the world. So Ginny goes on and decides to have pity on Walt, and decides, like, it seems like they're both kind of clicking conversation wise. And so they start to go on and not only like get away from this party, but they're starting to like walk into town, making the way to the Covey engineering building. And so really we have where both of them are to make it to the spot where I guess another rocket is to be prepared to lift off to Mars. And so they're kind of seeing this from a very off distance. And so we have it where Ginny is asking Walt, like, well, hey, why Mars? And we have it where Walt is to kind of have the whole boat thing and talk about that he just wants to discover something. He wants to do something new, and like Mars just really has to be it. And so, like, kind of after that whole conversation, Ginny is to come to this realization, because Ginny is to immediately tell Walt that tomorrow she's moving. She doesn't say where, but she's moving. And so Walt is just like, oh, okay, so like throw caution in the wind because uh, like between both of us, this is never going to happen again. And Ginny's like, well, yeah, like let's go on and do that. So all of a sudden, we find out where Ginny is moving. She's moving to Mars, and we of course have Walt, who's just like, what? Like, but after Ginny is to go on to Mars, we find out that like she's starting to text him, and so they have these like really like long stretched amount of conversations between one another. And I'm just like, how is it that they have cell phones on Mars, and how is it that like even on different planets we can just go on and just cell phone one another? It just seems really weird. So you would think that those bills would be like out of this world. I made a space joke. And so we go on and like we have like Walt who's realizing that he is just obsessed with this girl and he barely knows who she is. So the more and more we have Ginny who's like send these videos to Walt, just kind of talking about things, about talking about space. And so we have it where, of course, Gary is stuck at his dead end job. He comes in late one day because he just doesn't care anymore. And like Gary is telling, of course, Walt here, it's like, well, that's okay because I'm already going to dock your pay. Like, okay, whatever, Gary. So Walt goes on and is to realize that Sophie is at this coffee shop because Wi-Fi, and so Walt is like having to forcibly give this girl a cup of coffee because she needs to pay for something so she can uh, be able to continue to just stay here to use their Wi-Fi, and so Walt is giving Sophie a cup of coffee, and she's like, "Well, wait a minute. Like, so the reason why I'm stuck here talking to you is because of your fault, and then on top of that, I have to go on and pay for a coffee that I don't want." It's so Walt is just like, "Well, yeah. Like, do cash or credit?" So Sophie gives him credit card, and so all of a sudden we just have it where Walt just decides to just sit next to Sophie, and then they just start talking for a long stretch of time. And while Walt is also kind of putting this flask of alcohol in both their drinks, and so they just continue to talk the whole time. So we all of a sudden, while both of them are talking, and how Walt is to realize that Sophie like is to talk to a guy that's at Mars, and it's like, well, why aren't you going to Mars? Like, do you have $1 million to go to Mars? And Sophie's just like, well, yeah, I do. And Walt is like, well, do you have like $2 million? And Sophie's like, well, yeah, I do. And so Sophie is to realize like, well, hey, like, why aren't I like having a plane, or why aren't I kind of like getting a ticket to go off to space like right now? And that's like kind of Walt's question is like, well, why aren't you going to space? Because she's like, well, I have a phobia, and Walt is just like, oh, come on, like you have a fear of arrows. So we have it where Sophie is to realize that she's going to go and take this ticket to go to Mars, and all of a sudden we have Walt who's to watch this video. And oh, by the way, these guys weird lists of things. uh Sophie is to give Walt this list of all these things that her boyfriend is to have, that is to be on this weird checklist. And eventually Walt is to have this checklist of weird things that he's always ever wanted to do, which will never get accomplished, like desperately trying to get Gary out of that coffee shop because he's always there, for them to just go on adventures. Really, a lot of the stuff that Walt just wants to do is like just these weird, goofy, one of a kind like tasks that'll probably never get done. Um, and Sophie is eventually seeing this checklist and is like, you know how like stupid this is? And Walt's like, I don't care. Like, throw caution to the wind. So kind of a free spirit. I like it about like if anything, like I'm liking Walt, even though like it's irrational and stupid and can get you into jail. This guy is fun. So we go on and we have Walt, who's just like, well, I gotta go to space. Like Sophie's now going to space. I need to go. I have to go. So Walt is watching this video of Ginny mentioning that there was some cat who accidentally made its way into some escape pod, and so now Ginny, I guess, is taking care of this random cat that is to, of course, be called Ripley because aliens or alien. So we go on and we have Walt, who's just like, wait a minute, like, so this cat was to make its way to Mars via this escape pod. Like, now I need to go on and do the exact same thing to this cat. Which, anyways, so Walt is to go on and pack all his things and just follow Sophie wherever she goes in this airport because he re-bumps into her and he's like, well, hey, like, just tell these guys that I'm a family member of yours and I'll follow you all the way to where you kind of get, like, dropped off. And Sophie's just like, no. So because she's like, what are you doing? We find out that Walt was to steal everything from this free store. And Sophie was like, well, no, like, none of the stuff in the store is free. Like, you just stole all that stuff from that store. He's like, oh, well, they really should change the name then. So we go on and we have Walt, who's following Sophie whether she wants him to or not. And so by the time that Sophie makes it onto the plane, she's consistently dancing because when she has a fear, she starts dancing to try to snuff it out, to snuff out that fear by dancing it out. So the further on we go into this film, every single time that Sophie is to just have this fear, she just starts breaking it down into this weird, goofy dance thing. And to the point where Walt is to kind of accompany her so she won't be weirdly dancing alone. Because baby don't dance in a corner. Anyways, it's sit in a corner. Did you ever see Dirty Dancing? No. Yes. Anyways, so I know Patrick Swayze is in that movie. She's like the wind. Everything else. He watches a weird cluster of films. I watch everything. Hence why I have a video where I review 20 movies because I watch everything. Anyways, pushing on. So, and then may be on there for a limited time. Who knows? It's probably be on there forever. Anyways, so, Dirty Dancing. I mean, Walton and Sophie. So, Sophie makes it onto the plane, and so we have it now where Walt is going through all these back alleys and all these weird security access places, and he is like Mission Impossibling, trying. If that's even a thing that I can say here. We have Walt who's kind of like scooting his way, like sneaking his way into this escape pod, and he makes it onto this escape pod, which then lands him to be able to make it on this rocket to go to what really isn't Mars. It's just to have them go onto this rocket to then make it onto this kind of space station to then make it to Mars. Because, of course, we have our peoples here who are, of course, going into a ship called Almarun 4. Almarun 4? I'm a run 4. Pushing on. So, all of a sudden, Sophie is to bump into Walt again as Walt is trying to go into one of these air ducts to hide for a while in Omaron 4. Or Oma Run 4. Olar Run 4. Anyways, is what it is. So, Sophie all of a sudden is bumping back into Walt, and so immediately we have it where Sophie is thinking that at some point that Walt is going to get caught because he keeps going on and saying that he works here, and Sophie's like, I don't know, you're lying to people. Like that's never going to work. So Walt goes on and is trying to get this air duct open, and Sophie is just going on as like, okay, like just stay in my room and and just like we'll figure something out. So we then go on and have Captain Tartar. Why do we have these goofy names? Captain Tartar is to go on and go through the ship and start asking for people's ID, and Walt is just like, well, oh gee golly, you know what? Like I don't have my ID on me. It's in my room. Sorry. Like so we go on and we have Captain Tartar who's like, well, like once you do find your ID, just kind of scan it onto the wall and we'll log you in. Yeah. So we go on and we have these people kind of figure that these two are a couple, and so all of a sudden Captain Tartar is to meet and greet another couple, two women that are they've been together for 5 years, but it seems like they've waited till they can make it to space to finally get engaged and married and this and that. They don't know what they're doing. So we go on and we have it where it seems that Walt is technically being Calvin right now, and eventually both Sophie and Walt are to make it to this guy who is to be called Earl that has this robot called Carla that they're going to go on and give Walt this fake ID for him to technically be Calvin for right now. So they go on and we find out that Sophie is to be this like tech genius where it seems like she can repair anything. And she fixes Carla after Carla was of course to be uh like down for the count because she had beer in her, I guess, because Earl had gotten really drunk. So we go on and we continue to have Walt, who is this stowaway, and they start to have guidelines or rules where, like, it seems that Walt is asked about like privacy, if they can have privacy between one another, because maybe they'll have urges. And Sophie is just like, well, like you're not going to act on them ever. Find ways of self control. So all of a sudden we realize as Walt is to make his way into one of the rooms, it seems like Sophie isn't exactly practicing the art of self-control. Kind of feels like Ghostbusters 2, where Bill Murray is to put on this New York Jets sweater that he got from a girl, who knows, Joe Willie Namath. Uh, and then he tells Oscar to like, you need to like go on and have some self-control. So anyways, so Walt walks in on Sophie kind of a little unzipped, let's just say, and Walt then goes on as like, oh my god, like kind of walks off. So all of a sudden now they have to realize like how many real minutes they're gonna have of real privacy, that supposedly they've narrowed it down to like 12 minutes of actual privacy. So yeah. So we go on, and when Captain Tartar, God, the name is so goofy, but like, man, the girl who actually plays Captain Tartar, like, man, does she go on and really do well with a crappy, goofy named character. And she just tries to make it work, as well as any number of these people. So Sophie goes on and is, of course, to to be found out that her birthday's in 2 weeks. And Walt is just like, well, hey, we got to do something for your birthday. Sophie's like, well, I don't do anything for my birthday. And so Walt is like, well, we're going to do something for your birthday. So Sophie's like, no, for birthday. Another. it It's a stupid joke. Anyways, pushing on. So we have Walt that desperately wants to go on and do things, like all the stuff that they can do on this thing called the space station. He wants to do. He wants to go spacewalking. He wants to go to these seminars and stuff like that. And Sophie's like, no, we shouldn't do anything because you're going to get caught. So they decide to go on, and Walt pushes Sophie to do all these things. And the spacewalk part kind of freaks her out. So she starts dancing while they're going on doing the spacewalk. And so eventually they go on and they do it together, so to speak. And then they go back into the room and they unclothe because they're just that hot and heavy with one another. So one of them is like, you're looking pretty good. And like, you're looking pretty good. So after that moment, it seems like the ship is to hit into some kind of debris, which kind of forces both of them to eventually store away in some storage room. So they won't be checking all IDs and all this kind of stuff, all this rigmarole. So they go and they hunker down into this room, and they start to look at all these visuals. They look at Titan, Europa, the Big Bang, the beginning of all things, to show how it all happened, theoretically. So they're watching all these fireworks and all these things go off, and it seems like they're so close to kissing, but it seems like they go to bed instead. Too bad. Somebody could have had some kiss making. So, some kiss making, huh? So, we go on and have forcibly Walt, who has to go on and make this speech at a seminar because it seems that Walt has to forcibly fill in for somebody, and he is not that intelligent enough to try to talk his way out of this. So Walt instead just goes on and is to talk right to Sophie and just have this speech to Sophie about like, hey, like this doesn't really make sense of why Sophie would have all these checklists of all these things for this kind of perfect thing when really like you can go on and like just kind of like find something that you've known all along and like and this and that and like really we have this kind of like romantic moment where like Walt is to try to like instead of going after this perfect man, how about you just go for a man that's right here right now kind of thing. Like just saying that like in a weird bizarre-ish way we have Walt who's just saying like, well, instead of like pining away for something, like do something now. And so all of a sudden we have the girls that are supposed to be married, engaged, something. We go on and have these girls that are realizing like, well, hey, how about we have an engagement party right now? Instead of waiting till we get to Mars, let's be engaged now. So all of a sudden we have Captain Tartar that is going and throwing this engagement party because Captain Tartar desperately wants a party of some sort because she is only known for being a captain that is to fly her way through some asteroid field. Huzzah for her. So we go on, we have this engagement party, but Walt is to ruin that engagement party by also having Sophie's birthday party. So Walt is to give Sophie a cupcake and say happy birthday. like we have Walt who at every point in endeavor is to basically just push Sophie to do something she doesn't want to do. And maybe that's the reason why Sophie eventually is to fall for Walt, simply because it's like she would go on and never do a number of things, and Walt is consistently pushing her to kind of really live her life. So I like that about this movie. So we go on, and so we have Sophie at this party who is to have to like had to like make her like dress out of these like weird foil things, and eventually because she doesn't have a dress for some odd reason, and so in the later part of the movie we have Sophie who has to like re-put on that same dress at the end of the film, to just kind of remember like the fun that they had before. So, because again, I guess still on Mars, they don't have dresses on Mars. I guess it is what it is here. So we go on and we have Walt and we have Sophie. So we have the moment now where both of them are like, things were going so well until this point where all of a sudden now we have to have it where like finally Sophie has to tell Walt, it's like, well, hey, like whatever happens here, like you're still a crook, you're still gonna get caught, and so like I can't see myself being with a person like here that I'm gonna have to keep trying to figure out some scheme or figuring out a plan to be with Walt, and so Sophie is like, you know what, I'm just gonna go on and distance myself from you so I can go on and like not get arrested or not be like conspirator to you, and because you're eventually going to get caught. There's no way out of this. So Sophie goes on and separates from Walt and is to go on to Mars, while Walt, of course, is in this storage room and he accidentally pops his head out, and the room, of course, to get scanned, and so the room scans Walt because they scan his DNA. And they're like, "Oh, hey, Walt, yeah," like the robot voice is like, Walt, good, you're going to get arrested on Mars. And so Walt goes on and gets arrested in Mars, and so Sophie is watching on as Walt is getting arrested and getting carried away to be in prison. So we go on and we have Sophie who is making it to Mars with the Calvin family. We find out in this story that Sophie was to lose her parents, and so it seems that Calvin's family had stepped in and adopted Sophie technically, and like that's how like Sophie is as rich as she is because she's, I guess, with the Calvin family, and they're rich, I'm assuming or assessing. So Sophie goes on and is to be with the Calvin family. And at one point, Calvin was to prepare this whole room for her, and like Sophie was to cry for how like beautiful this was, as Calvin was saying like, "Hey, I've been trying to contact you for a while," and Sophie's like, "Well, I'm sorry, like I was like my tablet died," because Sophie was trying to go on and find some scheme for Wall to try to make through these air ducts to make his way into this one storage room, and so her tablet died in the process. So Sophie goes into Mars, and it feels like a lot of things just aren't really working out for her. It seems like people are making plans for her. It seems like Calvin is making plans for her, pushing her to go on, and like, well, hey, like I don't think you need to go on anymore and continue any of your schooling or thesis or whatever. Like you already have a job, you already have something going on. Like so, like, and Sophie's just like, well, no, I still want to finish my classes. I still want to finish my thesis. I still want to like finish this up. And Calvin's like, well, you already have a life anyways. Like, what are you like? We also have it where like Sophie is to hear what uh really her family is to think about Walt the stowaway, and they start ribbing into him, and they say it's like, well, yeah, uh, like he's like a nobody. He's like he's just this average guy, and so he really thought that he can um, go on and be worthy of coming here and uh, and coming to Mars. So we go on and have Walt, who, let me pause here for a second. All right. So Walt goes on, and he is in this interrogation room because I guess they don't have any prisons in Mars. So Walt goes on and is going to talk to Ginny because Ginny is to have a prison guard that we find out is actually her boyfriend. And so Ginny's like, "Oh my god, so you like hooked and crooked your way to Mars just to just to be with me?" And so we go on and we have Walt who's just like, "Well, yeah." And it's like, "Well, like you don't really know one another." And plus also Sophie is to even find out how long that both of them have really been a couple, because Sophie is to ask like Walt how many years have both Jenny and him been together, and Walt is just like, "Well, it was a day." And Sophie's like, "Really?" Like, So we go on and have Ginny, who is just like, "Well, yeah, like things between the both of us aren't going to work out because I have a boyfriend named Edgar, but hey, here's a consolation prize. Here's this cat called Ripley, and here you go." So now Walt is now stuck with this cat, and so all of a sudden we go on and we now have it where Walt is going to talk to Leon Kofi, the billionaire. So Leon Kofi is talking with Walt here, and excuse me, and he tells him like, "Here's the thing. We have been monitoring you for a while. We've gone on and done all these like hidden cameras and stuff like that, showcasing that we knew exactly what you were doing. We saw you the whole entire time, and we really just thought that like we could make this viral thing out of you." And so Leon is to mention that he's going to make Walt here some kind of like spokesperson or some kind of influencer, and because all these videos that they had kind of sent to YouTube have gone viral, and so they're gonna go on and have Leon be the spokesman for Mars instead of arresting him and booting him out to Earth and have him get arrested. And so it's like, well, man, like things just work out for Walt conveniently. So all of a sudden, like we have it where Walt is to turn around and do these like pictures and stuff like that with, of course, the billionaire who's mentioned. It's like, well, yeah, I could have gone on and cured world hunger like that, but instead I decided to just go to Mars. And so, like, we have Walt who's like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." Like, okay, sure. Just like, because this guy's just like, is just a piece of work. So, nothing wrong with Zach Braff, though. But, anyways, so we go on and we have Walt who is to be on Mars, and he just becomes a barista again on Mars because we really have where Walt doesn't have any real like thing besides him just being a barista, so he's just kind of stuck being a barista still on Mars. So all of a sudden we have it where Walt just realizes that he's never going to be anything anywhere he goes. That like life is never going to change for him, and so we have at one point where he has this like euphoric kind of moment when he's talking to Captain Tartar again, and really we have it where Walt is to go on and talk to Leon, and Leon is saying like, "Well, hey, like I'm gonna go on and I'm gonna like considering you're such an average guy, like you're so average that like it's kind of off-putting to people." And so like we're gonna have to figure out a way to make you popular again. So they're gonna ship Walt out to go to this other planet they had found, and he'll be the first guy to do that, and that will kind of increase his popularity. And so Walt is going on. I'm like, you know what? Like, I'm kind of done like discovering all these things. Like, I'm kind of done with this adventure. And so Walt goes on. He's like, you know what? Like, because we have it where like, or Walt keeps calling all the robots like Gary. So we go on and we have Walt, who is now like wanting one of these robots to call Sophie, and come to find out, Sophie is going on and trying to leave the planet, making it back to Earth. Because Sophie is to go on and talk with her adopted mother, uh, and it seems that her adopted mother is to kind of tell her, it's like, well, hey, like, you don't have to be on Mars because Calvin's here. It's like, and also if anything, like you're always going to be in our family, like whether or not like you're with Calvin, you're always going to be with us. And Sophie's like, well, but like, isn't that wrong? Isn't that like crazy to like not? And like, but the girl's like, no, it's fine. So Sophie decides to just make her way back to Earth, and so Walt is going to hijack this plane yet again, or hijack the ship yet again, to go on to see Sophie, and is to, of course, like say to her that going to Mars wasn't the adventure, you were the adventure. And so we, of course, have it where Sophie's like, well, you know what, out of probably all the times that I hate you and like and whatever, like, man, do you just kind of come up with this stuff just right out of your patukas? And Walt is just like, well, yep, I do. So both of them eventually go on and kiss one another. We also had it where Walt was to buy this like souvenir for Sophie, this little globe thing that at some points it gets like tore up, and Walt figures out a way to sew it back together. And so weirdly, Sophie is to kind of press this thing and it still weirdly works. So yeah, so we go on and have this very goofy movie that ends in a kind of weird way. So it seems that no matter what, these people are destined to be who they are, but at least they found one another at the end. So that's really the conclusion of this story. So with that said, I think I'm just going to get out of here. Let me know in the comments below if there's a bajillion things that I probably forgot about while I was talking about this film, because I'm sure there was. At the end of the day, I think that's all I want to say about this movie, I think, for the most point. So I'm going to get out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.